Hey everyone, welcome back to another Microsoft Flight Simulator tutorial. Just want to give a brief big thanks to the 250 new subscribers since the release of my VFR VATSIM introductory video, and if you haven't yet seen it, I highly encourage you to check it out if you're new to flying on VATSIM. Otherwise, if you're new here and you enjoy this video or learn some things, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below as it helps greatly in growing my channel. If you don't like the video, please leave a comment on how I can make things better. That all said, today I want to talk primarily about reading VFR charts, navigating based on that, some airspace rules which are all going to tie into VATSIM, as well as talking about how to navigate using your GPS and your VOR navigation equipment. We've got a bit to cover today, so let's get into it. Alright, in this video we're not going to talk too much about reading your primary flight instruments. I'm actually going to talk mostly about some airspace stuff, but I'm also going to talk about our navigation equipment. So I will talk about our nav equipment, our central deviation indicator, or course deviation indicator, CDI, and our GPS unit. We'll talk about how those work, talk about the two nav sources, GPS and nav, which if you select this, right now you can see it's in GPS, but if I select either the nav GPS button or the CDI button, they do the same thing. It'll switch between VOR lock or VLOC, which is how you track a VOR radio, and GPS mode. Over here, this is our flight plan button, FPL. Again, this is the Cessna 172 that comes with the Premium Deluxe. So it's going to be a little different if you're flying at something with a G1000, but you can hit flight plan to edit the waypoints, which obviously will be preloaded if you come in the sim with a flight plan. The other option is to hit direct, fill out your location, hit enter, hit the on-screen cursor button again, scroll down to activate, hit enter, and it'll give you a direct course, direct heading, a direct track to the waypoint that you put in. I'm not going to use that for this flight. Instead, I'm going to use the, and I'm also not going to hit enter because I'm about to file a flight plan, not file a flight plan, but enter a flight plan, but I'm not going to use that. Instead, I'm going to fill out a flight plan from Manhattan to Harrington, back to Manhattan, Kansas. All you do is the same thing. You select the flight plan button, use the big knob to go up and down, use the little knobs to fill out the IKO or the waypoints or whatever. And that's kind of it. You're going to hit activate, and now it's loaded into the GPS. Again, if you fill out your flight plan from the simulator menu, it's going to come in pre-filled out. Now, before we get into the flight, I want to talk about airspaces, reading a sectional chart, and just the introductory level stuff that you need to know to competently fly in VATSIM. I'm not giving a flight lesson here. I'm just going over some of the basics so that you can have the foundational pieces to begin flying VFR on VATSIM. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about are the features that you can pick out on a map. These, for example, these obstructions, whether they be trees or towers or whatever, I doubt they'd be trees, but the values in parentheses, those are feet above ground level, and then the numbers above it are feet above mean sea level. This big value right here in the middle, this 2.6, in every little rectangular area formed in the map itself, you can see these big numbers that stand out. That's the maximum elevation figure. So in this area, 2,600 feet is the maximum elevation or the maximum obstruction figure. And you can actually see what's driving that. If you look to the southeast of that value, you can see these, I would guess, radio towers or cell towers that stand up to about 2,500 feet MSL. And this other one stands up to about 2,549 feet MSL. So if you're flying in this area and you want to guarantee clearance above those obstructions, you would want to fly at about 3,500. If you're going westbound, you should be about 4,500. But you can see that, generally speaking, there's obstructions in the 2,000 foot to 3,000 foot range. So if you're going westbound, you should be even 1,000 plus 500 feet. So you'd probably want to be 4,500. Some other things that you can pick out. You can pick out interstates, highways. They're marked. There's I-70 there. And those are going to be captured pretty well by the Bing satellite imagery. And if you travel east along I-70, you'll obviously eventually get to Topeka and Kansas City. So there's value in having yourself a VFR map if you're going to fly VFR, especially if you're going to do it on VATSIM. There's Marion Lake, something that you'd be able to identify. Maybe if you're trying to go to Hillsborough Airport down there, you would know that Marion Lake's to the northeast of that. There's some other features as well, such as this wind farm up to the north of the lake. I haven't flown there in the sim, so I don't know if it captured it in the simulator. But obviously, you've got the Kansas River that sticks out pretty well, and that's very well going to be captured by the Bing satellite imagery. So various terrain and human-made features that you can use to get from airport to airport. Now, on the topic of airspace, I want to start with some oddballs, like this restricted airspace. This is the Fort Riley reservation just west of Manhattan's regional airport. You cannot fly through that without explicit clearance. And then adjacent to that are some military operating areas that you can fly through. You just got to watch out for military traffic. Now, we're going to start with Class Bravo airspace. This is the most restricted, the busiest of the airspaces in the world. And if you're flying VFR, general aviation traffic, you're going to need explicit clearance to go, well, any traffic, but if you're flying, you're going to need explicit clearance to enter the Class Bravo. If you do not hear cleared through the Bravo airspace, then you're not cleared to go through the Bravo airspace. So zooming in here, you can see some features, obviously airport information. Oops, let me get that out of the way. Airport information such as the name, control tower frequency, ATIS, which is where you can get your weather and terminal operation stuff, field elevation, and more. And then, but really what I want to talk about is this inner ring. Well, all the rings, but we'll start with the inner ring first. Notice this right here. This is telling you how far up the Bravo airspace extends and inside this contour. So inside this contour, it starts from the surface and extends up to 8,000 feet. Zooming out a little bit, this 2,400 foot to 8,000 foot layer is the second ring. Everything in between the first contour and the next outer contour is Class Bravo from 2,400 to 8,000 feet, which means that you could technically fly below 2,400 feet to any of those small airports in that middle ring. So in the second to last ring there, it goes from 3,000 feet to 8,000 feet, and in the final ring, it goes from 4,000 to 8,000 feet. So you can see how it kind of climbs as it gets further away from the airport. And if we look at a three-dimensional representation of a Class Bravo, that's exactly what's happening. And there's a reason for this. Let's say that you've got a bunch of jet traffic that are being vectored in from the north. Let's say you got a jet that's coming in from the west and then gets vectored for the ILS to the south for whatever runway that is, probably like 19 left or something. And then as they come through here, they're going to be descending through 4,000, 3,000, 2,000 feet. And as they get closer to the airport, they're going to get lower and lower. So you've got multiple aircraft all being sequenced in for this right runway here, left from our perspective. And then you've got a slow Cessna coming in at about 5,000 feet going west. If we don't prevent that from happening, you're just going to go right through the sequencing for that runway, and we've had aircraft collide in airspace like this a long time ago. You've also got aircraft that are going to be on the other side departing to the south, the southwest, the southeast, and so you also, the same situation applies where you can't be cruising 5,000 feet in that middle ring there and then, potentially cross the departure path of any jets flying out of Kansas City International. That's not to say that you can't fly through or under the Class B. For example, if you're out in the northeast sector of Class Bravo airspace and you wanted to get downtown airport, you could fly, if you're flying through there, you could expect to be given vectors south and then southwest, or you could fly under the shelf to Kansas City downtown, like I mentioned before. Now, before moving on to Wichita's Class C airspace here, I do want to make a quick comment. Airspace, I don't think it's the hardest thing to learn in aviation, but it can be kind of difficult to pick up on. So if some of this is kind of not making sense or it's going too quick for you, pause the video, take a deep breath, rewind it, watch it again. I'm going to leave a link below in the description for the FAA User's Chart Guide. It explains every single marking that you could find in a VFR sectional. So highly recommend you go through that. And lastly, I am trying to keep this somewhat brief. I don't want this to be a 1.5 hour video on all the rules of airspace and navigation stuff. I just wanted to give you guys the foundational pieces that you could build upon going and take that stuff online to VATSIM yourselves. So again, talking about Class Charlie airspace here, and we know it's Class Charlie by the dark magenta lines, the solid magenta lines rather. And if we look at the inner ring here, we see that the Charlie airspace goes from surface to 5,300 feet MSL. And then the outer ring goes from 2,700 to 5,300 feet MSL. The rules for entering a Class Charlie airspace are a little less restrictive than a Class Bravo airspace. You don't need explicit clearance. You're just going to contact approach, or if Kansas City Center is the lowest level online, you'd contact them and say where you were, what you wanted, what you needed. So let's say you're this aircraft that's flying in from the southwest. Say there's a northeast wind, so you want to make the straight in for one of the runways there. You'd contact Wichita Approach if they're online, if you're on VATSIM, or you'd contact Kansas City Center. And you'd say, Skyhawk 358 Tango Whiskey, passing over, let's say, Viola. Kansas or whatever. That flag right there means that it's a landmark that you can call ATC on and say where you are. They should recognize it. It might be different in VATSIM, but in any case, tell them where you're at and what you need. You're inbound for full stop to Wichita National Airport, and they'll say, Skyhawk 358 Tango Whiskey, Roger. If that's all they say, then they'll probably give you an altimeter. But if that's all they say, you're clear to enter the airspace. It's that simple. They very likely will give you some additional information about the weather or the altimeter. And even though Class Charlie airspace is less busy than a Class Bravo, you very well may end up getting some restrictions like remain west of I-35 for traffic at McConnell Air Force Base, or you might get a limited vectoring if there's a lot of traffic. Now we're almost there. Class Delta airspace. This is right here, Manhattan Regional. You know it's Class Delta when you see the dashed blue. And this one's kind of weird. It's got like a half circle then it bumps into the restricted Riley airspace, so it's not a concentric circle. And same case with Marshall Airfield, which is part of Fort Riley, Class Delta airspace that bumps into restricted airspace. So if you wanted to enter a Class Delta from like the east in this example, well, you'd contact Tower. And you'd say, Skyhawk 358 Tango Whiskey, 10 miles to the east, inbound, close traffic, or touch and go, or full stop, whatever you wanted. And then they're going to give you instructions such as make straight in, enter left base, enter the downwind, whatever. So you need to be familiar with pattern entry procedures. And again, we know it's a Delta from the dashed blue, and we know that it's from surface to 3,600, as it is indicated in this little square. Same down at Marshall Airfield, where it's also surface to 3,600. And above both of these, since we're not under a Bravo or a Charlie, would revert to Class Echo airspace, which, speaking of which, that's exactly what lies out here where you don't see any markings. Echo airspace goes from 1,200 feet AGL to 18,000 feet, where it becomes Class Alpha airspace. So how do you know when it extends lower? It's this shaded magenta. Let me find a better example. Down here at Harrington, the shaded magenta indicates Class Echo airspace down to 700 feet AGL, rather than this 1,200 feet AGL that we just talked about. So anytime you see a shaded magenta on the shaded side, you can imagine Echo basically dropping to 700 feet AGL. And then outside of the shaded regions, it's the standard 1,200 feet AGL. And the reason we do this is that if you're flying IFR into an uncontrolled airfield, let's say Kansas City Center was online, they would provide you your approach procedure into Harrington, and then you would switch over to CTAF. I believe, I'm not an instrument pilot, I believe you would then switch over to CTAF and conduct your final, your landing into Harrington Airport. Remember, when you get below 700 feet AGL within the shaded area, you're going to be in Gulf airspace, which is uncontrolled, and you're going to be announcing your position without air traffic control via the Unicom and VATSIM, which is, I think, 122.8. Now, the last example I have here is of Emporia here. You see the dashed magenta that represents Echo to the surface. So there is no uncontrolled airspace within that. It's from the surface. And Echo kind of steps down here. It's kind of the similar concept to that of the Bravo and Charlie that we looked at. Outside of the shaded magenta, Echo is going to go from 1,200 feet to 18,000 feet. Inside this shaded magenta, but outside the dashed magenta, you're going to have a floor of 700 feet AGL, and that's going to go up into 18,000 feet. And then within the dashed magenta, Echo is going to go from the surface to 18,000 feet, since there's no overlying Class B or Class B, C, or D airspace. Now, before we jump back into the sim and talk about the navigation aspect, we've talked about visual identification of features. I want to talk about the VORs, how to identify them, and some of the information that they contain. You can see this little triangular figure here. That's where the VOR is located. Surrounding it is its compass rose, which is just showing you all the radials in degrees. It's the station name, station identifier, so Salina VOR with the ID SLN, and its frequency on 117.1, which you would tune into your nav radio. And with the compass rose, you can use that to plot radials and fly along radials, which kind of ties into how VORs work, which we're about to talk about. But you can see that this 0-degree radial will take you to the north, and this 180-degree radial will take you to the south. It's exactly what it looks like, and they're there to help you navigate. Alrighty, folks, welcome back to the cockpit. Departing Manhattan, Kansas to the southeast right now. southwest rather. It's beautiful, and we're gonna climb up to 3,500. Do a brief.
Skywalk 8 Tango Whiskey. What's your planned cruise altitude?
Gonna climb up to about 3,500 for 8 Tango Whiskey.
Yeah, roger that. You can maintain VFR, proceed on course, make sure you maintain clear of the restricted areas off to your right, and climb to 3,500.
Alright, we will maintain clear of the airspace and proceed on course, 8 Tango Whiskey. Alright, so we're going to proceed to the southwest. I'm going to do a quick tutorial on the GPS navigation, reading the equipment, VFR navigation, as well as VOR stuff. So for GPS first, because I'm in GPS mode, you're going to use the CDI, your course deviation index, or indicator, and you can see that the needle's to the left.
5411, thank you. Wind's calm,
and if we look at our
11,
GPS and magenta line, we are to the right of the magenta line, the needle's to our left. So they're telling us the same thing, that we're right of course, and so we're right of course. We need to get on a direct track of 190 degrees. Our current track is 182 degrees. And track is different from heading. Track is showing you the direction you're moving. Heading is the direction you're pointed. So we're currently aimed at about 178 degrees, which is also happens to be our track. Now, if the wind was screaming at us from the right or left, we had a strong crosswind, then our track and heading would differ by almost 10-15 degrees even, maybe even more. So I've got us cruised out here and on profile. I want to talk about how you can easily hold this track. Now, looking over here, I've got a direct track of 190 degrees, and I'm flying about 192. Of course, I'm banked to the right here, so I'm going to need to correct left. I'm 3 degrees off. I'm just going to do a light correction. Just turn the nose a couple degrees to the left to get 190 degrees. And then once I get that set, once I get 190 degrees in there, I'm going to bug the heading that gives me 190 degree track. Again, they're not always going to be identical, because if you have a wind coming at you from the left or right, there's going to be a difference in the angle. So I'm going to set my current heading, right? I have a track of 190. I'm going to set my current heading, and I know that if I hold that heading, I will hold 190 degree track, as long as the winds don't change. So there you are. I'm holding my heading, and I'm looking over here, and I'm holding 190 degrees. So that's going to be that for the GPS portion of this tutorial. Now I want to talk about the VOR portion. VOR is how things used to be done, and has kind of, FAA is phasing out VORs, but you could still use them, and it's good to have the redundancy. That way if the GPS goes out, you'll have VOR as your backup. So now we're going to talk VOR navigation, and the overlying principle is that we're just going to dial into the Manhattan VOR, and I'm going to track along the 0 degree radial to the north. Now, these radials you can think of as physical lines that you can track along that extend for miles and miles on end. In fact, the Manhattan VOR, well, the VORs in general, you can expect to intercept the VOR signal 40 miles out. So I'm going to draw the 0 degree and 180 degree radials for illustration purposes that I think are going to help highlight what exactly we're doing here. Because I didn't show it earlier, I'm going to show you how to tune into a VOR. You're going to want to select this knob. Make sure you're editing your nav radio, not your comm. Set the station frequency in. Switch it into the active nav, and there you see MHK as our identifier, so we know we're detecting Manhattan's VOR. So navigating with the VOR, it's just like the GPS. We can look at our CDI, we know that we're to the right of it because the needle is to the left of the center. And if we look at our four-flight diagram here, or sky vector, and we've conceptualized that north-south radial, we know that we need to intercept it from the east. So we're going to track to the northwest, intercept it, just as we did for the GPS earlier. Now, one thing that you're going to keep in mind is whether you have a to flag or an away flag. The to flag is the up pointing triangle that you can see on our CDI, and that just means that if we track along this heading or this track, we will track to the VOR. Now, we're going to intercept this just like we did with the GPS. Just as we did for the GPS. You can see the needle is coming to the middle now. It's a little less sensitive than the GPS was, but nonetheless, we're getting there. So we're going to start a shallow turn to the right and make sure that we intercept that track. And just as we did, we're going to lock it in. I will say there's a pretty big discrepancy between my heading indicator and my track that I end up fixing later, which I've skipped, but you do have gyroscopic precession that happens in this simulator. Now, as we approach the VOR from the south, we're going to approach the cone of confusion, which is where we're going to lose a little bit of our clear signal that gives us our to and away flag as well as our radial information. So as we approach the VOR, which is located on the airport, you're going to see two things happen. First, you're going to see we're going to get actually more precise tracking information, which is going to cause the CDI to drift to the left because I'm not adjusting my course, and then we're going to lose all information as we enter the cone of confusion. And as we get closer to that VOR, you see that CDI needle slide to the left because we're getting a more precise signal. And in just a moment here, we're going to lose the VOR signal entirely. So right now is not where you want to chase that needle. Again, we just lost it, so we have no lateral input, and then we get it right back. Now the needle's on the right. Again, I wouldn't go chasing the needle too much. And we have a from flag. Now, the from flag means, again, that if I stay on this track of 000 degrees, that I'm going to track away from the VOR. And to the right there is Manhattan. If you're being a good pilot, checking out your VFR map, you know that that's Manhattan from the VFR sectional. And now I'm going to make a U-turn for our last demonstration. Last application that I want to show is how to use this 190-degree radial to get all the way to the Harrington Airport. You can draw this out on SkyVector or whatever. Take that radial all the way there. Again, we're still using a Manhattan VOR, and I've got 190 on the OBS, the CDI there. I'm just adjusting my heading indicator to maintain that 190-degree track. So, conventional wisdom says that if I take this 190-degree radial, I will get all the way to Harrington, and let's see if that works out for us. And as you pass the airport, or not the airport, but the VOR, you should see a from flag that indicates we're traveling away from the VOR on that radial. Now, one little note that is kind of a navigation thing, we're about 18 nautical miles out, and we're about 2,000 feet above station altitude, Harrington being station that we're going to. So we need to lose about 2,000 feet because we're making a straight-in approach. Harrington has a north-south runway, and the winds are out of the south-southwest, so we're just going to fly straight in, meaning we need to descend 2,000 feet. And in a general aviation aircraft like a Cessna, you can expect to lose 300 feet of altitude per every nautical mile traveled. So calculating top of descent is pretty simple. It's going to be 2,000 feet divided by that descent rate to get the distance to start your descent. If 2,000 divided by 300 is too hard for you, you can take out 100, a factor of 100, and just do 20 divided by 3, which is rounded up 7 nautical miles. So about 7 nautical miles out, we should begin our descent. And again, we're never reliant on just one mode of navigation. We also have our eyeballs and our VFR sectional, and you can see the river off to my right there. We know that looking at our sectional, we should have a river paralleling us all the way down to Harrington, and the airport should be about 5 miles to the east of that river. The end result should be a safe arrival to Harrington Regional Airport. Hold that aircraft off until it can't fly no more. Get a nice soft touchdown, hopefully on centerline. But welcome to Harrington Regional. Now, guys, ever since the VATSIM tutorial that I originally released about 2 weeks ago, I've had about 300 something new subscribers jumping on, and I welcome all of you here. And if you're a returning viewer, thank you for helping grow this channel. It really is motivating. It's just really awesome, and I appreciate that you guys have enjoyed my videos. If you're new here, I highly recommend subscribe. Got a lot more content coming up ahead. If you didn't like this, drop a comment below. Let me know how I could do better. All of your input helps grow this channel, and I really appreciate it. I have gotten back into the sky lately, flying in real world, so expect some more real world videos to come pretty soon here. And check out my Twitter, check out my Instagram for various clips of me flying in both the real world and some other stuff. Lastly, I know this is a pretty long video. None of this is super simple to grasp or teach, so again, don't use this for real world training. This is just for simulator use only, and I really hope to see some of you guys in the VATSIM skies flying VFR. So till the next video, folks, thank you, and I'll catch y'all later.